My name is Pat Miles. I have been an industry guy for 30 years. I've worked with a number of guys on the panel, and I started a sophomore organic years ago, and then after Medtronic acquired sophomore organic, ended up doing Nuvasive for about 17 years, and have recently taken on Alphatec Spine. And I loathe when I hear that people say that the spine is commoditized, and I think there's elements of spine that's commoditized, but oftentimes it's the implants. There's so many variables in spine surgery. The opportunity to make it better, I think, is still before us, and so there's way too many variables that we have yet to control that I think provide an opportunity for innovation. So my conflicts are significant. I'm likely the most conflicted and the least objective. So take it for what it's worth. I think innovation is a fascinating topic. I think it's about ultimately how we create value for one another. So it's a value creation effort. Since value is an economic proxy, it oftentimes is how well is something accepted or valued, and oftentimes it's about how things are arranged. I love spine procedures. I don't love individual spine devices, but I think assembled, it means a lot. And I think it's interesting. Dr. Uribe is a car guy, and I think that if you look at the cars on the slide, both the same atoms, but assembled differently. I think the Mona Lisa is a great example. It's Da Vinci assembled a paint on a canvas. It wasn't about the value of the paint, and it wasn't about the canvas. It was the assembly. Like a piano having 88 keys, it's about the music. It's not about the piano. I'm a huge fan of certain economists, and this is a great quote by Thomas Sowell. He talks about while market economies are oftentimes thought of as money economies, they're still more so knowledge economies. Economic transactions are purchases and sales of knowledge. After all, the caveman had the same natural resources at their disposal as we have today. And so money is just a tool by which you exchange ideas. The reason that a lot of the surgeons get to charge a lot is because they have a unique set of knowledge. And so it's also about learning, and innovation is a huge element to it, is learning. And oftentimes it's characterized by gradual stumbling change. It is a long process. I love George Gilder. George Gilder talks about when we share knowledge, we create wealth. When we learn, we grow. I think that if you look at Nordhaus's example, the difference between our age and the Stone Age is in the growth of knowledge. He won the Nobel Prize in economics about talking about the labor cost of an hour of light. In the Stone Age, it was 58 hours. In 2010, you walk into a room and an LED light comes on. But it's all of the learning curves through that experience that ultimately got you to that place. It didn't happen overnight, and I think that so often people think that innovation happens overnight, or there's some great epiphany. Value creation is all about market acceptance, and I think this video is a perfect example. So,
what do you think? What would be the perfect flavor with this meal?
Cherry vanilla?
No, if it was Chinese food, right on the money. But this toasted almond.
What's going on? Barry can pick out the exact right flavor of ice cream to follow any meal. Go ahead. Challenge him. Challenge him.
Go on.
Franks and beans.
Scoop of chocolate, scoop of vanilla. Don't waste my time. Come on. Push.
Seamless.
Grilled.
Sauteed.
I'm with you.
Potatoes au gratin. Asparagus.
Rum raisin.
Yeah. What? How do you know he's right? How do we know? 1,400 retail outlets across the country. That's how we know.
So, great example of verification that markets dictate acceptance of innovation. And so I love Bill Gates' quote, just in terms of the time it takes. I think so often people overestimate what happens in 2 years and underestimate what happens in 10. And I think that so often the great innovation happens over the long term. Kind of bringing it back to spine, and clearly this is not an exhaustive list, but I thought that minimally invasive spine surgery was a great kind of an example to speak about in terms of the time it's taken to ultimately be reflected in the marketplace in any meaningful way, all the way back to chymopapane to shrink the nucleus, and then Dr. Cambid describing foraminal approaches in endoscopic surgery back in '73. I had the pleasure of working with the good Dr. Foley and Dr. Mo Smith years ago on microendoscopic discectomy. I thought the early days of paramedian discectomy were very, very challenging through a tube. You're starting to finally see a ubiquity associated with tubular decompression, but it's taken, 25 plus years. I was at a company at NuVasive where we tried to rethink the whole foraminal approach with a guide frame and neurophysiology. But again, I think the lesson here is these things take a lot of time, and oftentimes they're very narrow. And so initially it was purely just a decompression device. But I think once it got to a more of a reconstruction utility, you started to see more enthusiasm, more acceptance. And I recall back of the Sextant in 2000. And so if, at least as an industry guy, I think of the goals of spine surgery as decompression, stabilization, and alignment. In the early days were just decompression, and it was very difficult to compel. But I think as we start to move toward acceptance of minimally invasive tools, the reconstruction part's a big deal. And I think the early experience on the reconstruction side was challenging, and it took a long time. I also got to work with Dr. Pimenta in terms of disc height restoration and indirect decompression. We started to get to a decompression and a stabilization view. We also took some wrong turns. If I could say that Trans One was a wrong turn, it was a challenging one. But I think we breached the foundational goals of what was described as spine surgery fundamentals. And clearly I'm biased, but I think that the opportunity to decompression, stabilization, alignment in the same sitting with regard to a single position spine surgery is again a step forward. But if you look back, and we started well north of 50 years ago, these things take a long time, and each feeds the other. If you don't think that Dr. Cameron's description fed the tubular retractor, which fed the reconstruction, which fed the lateral surgery, you're wrong. Each of them fed the other. And so I love the view of applied learnings. And again, I guess I'm a George Gilder sycophant, but I love that you join the 1% of the 1%, not by leaning to the experts, but by creating new expertise, not by knowing what the experts know, but by learning what they think is beneath them. And I think that that's the reflection of all of the work required that ultimately emanates in innovation. And so I just think it's such an articulate reflection. And so, Edison talked about the value is in the learnings and the ability to fail. And I love the quote of, "I've not failed," he once said. "I found 10,000 ways something didn't work." And so I thought another interesting dynamic is that at times innovation is a happenstance, and then science subsequently describes innovation. Thermodynamics followed the steam engine, and aerodynamics followed the airplane. And so I think that there's great impediments to innovation. I think big bureaucracies have really no motivation to innovate. And oftentimes, they're so bought into the status quo that there's not the need to ultimately further afield. I thought that this was also interesting. This is an aerial shot of North Korea. And innovation happens in environments where there's freedom and where there's safety. And so the ability to innovate oftentimes is completely requisite to your ability to take a risk and to fail. And I thought that Thomas Jefferson quote was a great one, which is, "Liberty is a parent of science, and the virtue in a nation that will be great in both in proportion as it is free." And it's interesting to see all the lights in South Korea and no lights in North Korea. So our view, and again, I'm the least objective guy on the stage, is that ultimately controlling variables is the answer to innovation. And so our investment thesis at ATEC has been all about how we invest in informatics, control the variables within the context of a procedure, and then evaluate how well we've done against that. And so spine innovation is in its infancy. I love that everybody thinks that spine is a commodity. It is far from it, and there are so many opportunities to make it better. When I was in Sao Paulo, Brazil, we were taping people to beds. In 2024, we're taping people to beds. It is complete nonsense. If we can't think of something better than tape for a patient position, I would suggest that we haven't figured everything out associated with spine surgery. So anyway, thanks very much.